And welcome back to Enduring Minds here on the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. I am your co-host along with Jason Bahamundi. Jason, how you doing today?
I'm good, Evan. How are you?
Yeah, things are trending in the upward direction, I will say, after my little ankle situation that I had back in June there. So getting more and more into hopefully some uphill treadmill work, which is what I've been doing the last week, and moving forward with that and maybe getting back to some proper mileage.
When you say more and more, are you talking distance or just time at this point?
Just time on feet right now. If I can do uphill treadmill time on feet, I think that's going to be my best friend, and it's been going in the positive direction. So I'm going to take that as a win.
Awesome. I'll be joining you on the slight increase in mileage since I ran 52 miles at Javelina and DNF'd. I have run, I think, once for 45 minutes in going through this recovery. And I have a 50K on November in 10 days. So in November 22nd, I'll be fresh since I haven't run too much since then.
Yeah. You know what? Those are the ones that sometimes surprise you the most, eh?
100%, dude. I'm
Yeah.
excited for it. It'll be close to home, so I don't have to worry about too much travel. Like we'll drive up the night before and spend the hotel night there and then come back home because it's in the Santa Barbara area. So
Yeah. So we have a fellow Javelina runner on our podcast today, Landon Hildebrand, who is a registered psychologist. He owns a co-owner of a company called Approach Psychology based in Edmonton, Alberta, in my home province here. And Landon is also an accomplished trail ultra runner. He's put himself out there in big ways, and just his honesty around DNF, self-talk, all of these things. I'm excited to be able to have him on today. So without further ado, let's bring Landon on.
Hey, everyone. It's good to be here.
Thanks for coming on. Hey, before you jump in, Evan, I want to also state if we're going to be open, honest, and transparent, thank you, Landon, for coming back for a second episode because I somehow don't recall how to publish podcast episodes and I lost our original. So thanks for coming back on.
Hey, as I told you guys when you said, hey, we got to redo it, I was stoked because I get to hang out with you guys for another, hour and a bit. So it's good.
Yeah, we're gonna smash the idea that the sequels are always worse. That's what we're gonna do.
We're not gonna get sophomore syndrome here.
No, we're gonna smash it. So I've already kind of said what you do, and I mean I know that's all a part of us, but I love to start off the podcast, as Jason knows, is asking the question, who is Landon?
Yeah, who is Landon? I think it's easy to define myself by career or family or all those things. And like, honestly, that's somewhat how I define myself, but probably only for ease. The person that I'm always trying to be or working towards being is I try to be as honest and open as possible or as authentic to myself as possible. Cause as I've grown older and stuff, I actually kind of like me and I like who I'm becoming. And so, I would say who is Landon, and it's someone who's deeply flawed, highly hypocritical, and is totally okay with that for the most part, because I'm still just figuring it all out. So I think that's what defines me the best.
That is such a refreshing answer, right? Like I had a business mentor years ago, and he used to tell me, don't ask people what they do. It's the most boring thing in the world. Ask them what they do for fun and they light up. And so when we ask you, how do you define yourself? Who are you? Instead of going into here's my occupation and all of these other things, it's so refreshing to hear somebody talk about themselves in the way that you just did. So, I mean, look, if you're sitting here listening to this episode or watching us on YouTube, be prepared for that open, honest, and vulnerable scenario, because if he's kicking off with that, we're only going to get more and more into it. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that comes from a place of profound disappointment, but in a good way.
Okay.
And I think I became a psychologist because I wanted to prove to the world that I was smart enough. Like in my grade 10 yearbook, there's a quote that said, I can't remember what they're called, where they tell you what you're going to be in the future. And it was most likely to have a permanent goggle tan, Landon. And there's me. I look like I got a full beard because I've got such an extreme goggle tan because all I did was skied. All I did was ski, and I was a complete ski bum in grade 10 already. I barely went to school. And that came from a place of I had severe learning disabilities, couldn't even read properly till grade 5, and basically was given courtesy passes on mathematics and other things for most of my life until it all clicked one day. And so when I became a psychologist, it was kind of like, I finally made it. I passed all my EPPP, which is a huge exam that everyone does. I did it on the first try. I was valedictorian of my graduating master's class. I was teaching already. I've made it, and I felt exactly the same. There was no difference. And so, like, for me, that profound disappointment was an opportunity to be like, oh, maybe there's more, not more things I need to achieve, but like more of I need to be okay with me. And that's what's brought me to this place. So I think that's where that answer comes from a bit.
When you say you're fundamentally flawed, like I smiled when you said it, because I think too many of us go through life and don't accept our flaws for what they are. And how would you, coming through obviously trail, ultra running, DNFs, all of these pieces and things that happen to us in this sport and in life, really, how do you come to terms with that, like, acceptance of like being able to verbally say like, I'm fundamentally flawed and I'm okay with it?
Yeah. How do I think I'm overstating. I'm going to be hypocritical already. I'm overstating if I say that I'm fine with it. I don't think I've said a definite fine, but like, if I'm implying that I'm fine with it, I'm lying. It's something I'm always becoming fine with. And so, like Jason and Evan, or I guess it was Evan, defined me as a fellow Javelina runner. I'm also a fellow Javelina DNFer this year, and that's been hard for me to swallow because I've never had the fitness I've ever had going into the race. It felt amazing, except for my entire body below my ankles because of Achilles and plantar fasciitis stuff going on. But I think it's I'm okay with the process of getting to be okay with being flawed, and being okay with the fact that I'm not always the same person to everybody. I'm trying to be, though. I'm trying to be more authentic, but I'm fully aware and more comfortable with not being that person.
What's helping you get there? And before you answer that question, I will give you my example for myself. So in the past, I would always say, I really don't give a shit what people think of me, which was an absolute lie. I was petrified of what people thought of me, right? And then I started hanging out with Evan, and we were doing this show. And then I started talking to more and more people, and they would ask me about things that we talked about on this show. And then I talked about my disordered eating. And then all of a sudden, it just became easier to be me and not give a shit what people think, right? Because no matter what, I'm never going to appeal to everybody. So why worry about whether or not I'm appealing to everybody? And so I wonder if there are people or circumstances that you are uncovering as you go through this process of being comfortable with being flawed.
I think I'm going to loop back to what you're saying about your relationship with Evan here. But I'm going to start with the way I was raised. I asked my mom a question recently, because like, I don't think anybody in my family expected me to continue with education and become a psychologist. Like, again, most likely to have a goggle tan, permanent goggle tan, right? That was my identity, and I was fine with it. But I can never say that my parents were not proud of me. I have incredible parents, both deeply flawed, but absolutely wonderful. When I was 8 years old, I caught my dad having an affair. Very problematic. And I told my mom at 8, I didn't fully understand what I was telling her. They went through the process of working through it, and my dad became a different person. I did not have much of a relationship before. He then worked tirelessly to rebuild trust with the whole family, changed as a person drastically. And by the point when I was about 18, I think I finally forgave him and realized that my dad was the person that I was looking to for so many things, because he defined what it was to be flawed and to acknowledge that, make the reparations, because him and my mom did the hard work. They did really hard work, and they continued to do hard work to kind of get back together. And I realized, like, that's the example of what I think it is to be human, to do something really bad and then recover. So, like, in my mind, that was the environment I grew up in, where that was an open conversation in my family at all times. That was never a taboo subject, to the point that, like, I might have made too many jokes about it. My dad told me, recently, just turn down the jokes. They hurt a little bit. But like, it's an open subject that we talk about. And it culminated in, like, I had my dad officiate my wedding. So that's the environment I was born into. And I married someone who's very similar to that. Not like my dad; she hasn't cheated on me or like stepped out of the relationship. No, but she accepts me for who I am. And so I'm surrounded by these people who are proud of me, are telling me they're proud of me, who celebrate me, and not in a false way, like "good job," "yay, you can tie your shoes," like in a way it's like, "Hey, that was hard. You're disappointed. I want you to know that love is actually still consistent here." Whether that's a DNF, although if someone dumped me for a DNF, I don't think I would be staying with them, or it's like bad choices or difficult choices that I make. That's the environment I'm in. So if you're in relationships with someone like Evan or other people, and you are intentional about creating community around you that supports you, it becomes a whole lot easier to be okay with the parts of you that you traditionally might not be okay with, and not have to become someone else for other people, even though they might not love every part of you, but they still love you as a whole. It just becomes so much easier to do that process.
Yeah, I heard the word trust in there, and that kind of jumped out at me. And the way that obviously trust, I mean, there's two, I would say there's two camps for trust. There's the people who are give you their trust implicitly until you show them that they can't trust you. And then there's the type of people like my oldest daughter who made people like earn their trust to the point that it was like, you have to do everything to show me that I can trust you first.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there's two, maybe there's a third, but those are the two that pop into my mind. And really, like, trust, it takes time. It's, it's minutes, it's miles, it's, trust in our own bodies and our own beliefs and our own mind. But what was it for you in those moments of, were you somebody that always trusted implicitly, or did somebody have to earn your trust?
I think there's a huge shift from about the age of 24 on. I think before I was 24, and I wonder if that lines up with prefrontal cortex development or brain development, but before the age of 24, I think I had very low trust of anyone, including of myself. I was my biggest critic. I think that's one of the reasons my parents always made it clear and explicit that they were proud of me and for the things that I was doing. But after the age of 24, somewhere around then, I went on a trip to Europe by myself, and it was like kind of miserable because it was middle of winter, and I didn't have anyone to go with me. And so I kind of lone wolfed it entirely and backpacked around Europe. This is pre cell phones. This is well, cell phones existed, but not smartphones. I had to carry guidebooks and figure out like how to get to my hostels and stuff. And it was it was just a wandering period. And I think it was during that period of time that I learned to trust myself. I remember like a very distinct realization. Every time I'd walk into a new village or town or something, I'd be completely lost. I'm like, okay, I know what street, what rue, Monge, whatever it is that my hostel is on, but I have no idea where I am. And like these little pages of this guidebook just aren't giving me a good definition. There's like 8 more streets than they're actually posting in these books. And so I'd get so lost. And so I started to accept that every town I'd go into, I'd be lost for 2 to 3 hours. And then I'd find the town center with a fountain in it. And there'd oftentimes be a map that says, "You are here," in whatever language, but it's always a green or red dot. And I realized after I'd done that enough times that this is just going to be part of the process. You'll get lost, you'll wander, you'll find a map, you'll learn where you are, and you still won't know exactly where the hostel is, but you'll have a better idea based on that map. Right. And so I learned to trust myself. Like, yeah, you're going to wander for 4 hours and it's going to be okay. It's going to be cold, but you'll get there. And there's been like little things throughout my life that I've kind of picked that up. And I remember when I came home from that trip, I dated this person that I dated off and on in my childhood, not childhood, that sounds weird, in my teenage years and young adulthood. And it wasn't a good relationship. It probably wasn't healthy for either of us. And that ended really badly initially. I think we don't talk, but we follow each other on Instagram and stuff now. So I think we're friendly. And after that ended, though, like a couple weeks later, I met my wife. And the trust I had of this is a good thing, this is what healthy relationship looked like, was developed in those previous years of learning to trust myself. And like, I think that I became, after the age of 24, became someone who was very easy to trust. like very trusting of others versus suspicious of everybody.
So I wrote down a couple of things here, Landon, and I think your story of going into the town square and being lost, quote unquote, for 2 to 3 hours, and then gaining confidence made me ask myself, okay, did Landon's 2 to 3 hours feel shorter each time he went into a new town because he gained confidence that he knew where he was in a sense and would be able to circumnavigate the area to find where his hostel was, and how that confidence continues to grow? Because when you said earlier in your answer, I thought, man, I feel like he's describing myself. Like I've gotten more confident in talking about these things. So it's easier to talk about these things. And so was there a not just trust in yourself, and is that tied to confidence as you're making your way through these areas to be like, yeah, it's 2 to 3 hours. And then all of a sudden, the 2 to 3 hours doesn't feel like 2 to 3 days. It feels like 2 to 3 minutes because you have a plan in a way.
Yes and no. So I think my experience at that time would change. I remember this distinctly. My experience at that time would change in that it was a lot more fun wandering around for 3 hours. And I actually met some people on those 3 hours that were like, I have no idea where they are in this world now, but man, were they fun for like the 8 hours or 8 days that we spent together, right? But that experience felt the same amount of length. It just wasn't miserable anymore, and instead it was explorative. And so like it became easier, but it still was a journey.
Yeah.
And so like I'll relate it to like I've run quite a few 100K races. They never feel shorter, but they all feel progressively, I wouldn't say easier is the right answer, but like I can trust myself through the process each time. And so they're becoming like really smooth feeling. I think that's the way to say it. Like, it's like, okay, less random things are popping up, less anxiety is popping up, and more confidence is there.
Immediately made me think that how the goals will have changed over the course of your time in running the 100Ks.
Mm-hmm.
So your very first goal was more along the lines of, I just want to finish, right?
Yeah.
And then as you progress and you get to this point now where it's smoother, now you're like, how do I find that saving 1 minute, 5 minutes, 10 minutes against my previous time? And how do I just get better at it versus the first time, which is I just want to finish. So the trust and the confidence grows, in repeating what you're doing, even if it's on different courses and in different times of the year and everything else. You boil it down to it's a 100K, 62 miles, and that's what I have. That's the obstacle in front of me, and how I get to the finish line now is my execution part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always think that like my first 100K definitely was a like I want to finish. Second one was I don't want what happened last time to happen. No DNF, but then I decided to enjoy it. Like that was my goal, was to experience joy. I had no time goal. It was simply to enjoy it. And I remember having so much fun on that I think that was the 2022 or 2023 death race. And then, every 100K since then has been about, okay, I've learned these things. Let's see if I can learn them faster, or I can troubleshoot these things faster. Cause endurance racing is kind of an IT sport. It's like all about troubleshooting and fixing things as they go haywire. And like every race is slightly different, but like you get a new toolbox to apply to it. And I think that's why so many of us are attracted to it. Is like a great metaphor for life. And so like in this, going to Javelina this year, I was running the 100-mile. I went into it with some niggling injuries that turned out to be more significant than I thought, as well as some something I'm awaiting surgery for. That was really quite painful during the race. And I managed those things extremely well for the most part. But then I hit a limit of accumulated pain that I had never actually experienced before, where I wasn't able to use any more tools. I ran out of tools at 106 kilometers. At 100 kilometers, I was perfectly fine. I PR'd my 100K and could have PR'd by several hours based on how easy and flowy it was. And I went out feeling fine. At 106K, that cumulative pain, or like that growth of like add-on pain of all the issues that were going on, came to the point where I couldn't think my way through it anymore. And so it's like, oh, okay, that's a new challenge to try and figure out. Also, maybe the answer definitely was to DNF at that point. Like that's the key.
Yeah, it's I mean, the term that comes to my mind is like that gut feeling that you
Mm,
get. You're like, I've done everything that I possibly can to get through this, and now I have to unfortunately make a choice that you don't want to make the choice, but I think the word that comes to mind for me is that intuition and
yeah.
understanding. It's like, when can you trust your intuition and when should you not listen to it? And sometimes it's a matter of, I'll use me as an example. When I was going through my mental health journey with PTSD and all those other pieces that were coming along with it, I was not in a position, like my intuition, I felt like it was broken. Like I couldn't
Mm,
trust it,
yep.
whether that be racing, whether that be in life. But as Jason alluded to, like you build this confidence, you don't find it. You build it based on showing yourself and building this well of, I did this and this worked, and I did that and this worked. But how do you kind of come to terms with the intuition piece of like, do I trust it or don't I? And when can I and when can't I?
Yeah. I'll use this DNF as an example, in that I think the forces that try to encourage you to not trust your intuition are actually the unhealthy voices, right? Like I look at it, I was at my physiotherapist today, and like I was told to run less, except run more frequently, but run less, and to do this really boring run walk thing that I don't want to do. I feel fit, I want to run hard, but like my Achilles will not let me. And so like if that's what my physiotherapist, who's also a very good friend of mine, is telling me, um, and this is 3 weeks or more than 3 weeks post race, I made the right decision. But those negative voices in my head are going, yeah, but what if? What if? Like you at Coyote, you knew you decided to drop, and you pushed it for another 11K of wandering in the desert. Trying to just find if maybe things will work out. But the pain was so extreme that everybody was stopping, offering you, drugs, like offering you Tylenol and then Advil. And I can't take Advil because I've got blood pressure medication, all these other things. I had to explain that a lot, actually. It's amazing what people want to push on me. But it's like, no, you did try a lot of things. You made a wise choice. And your physio is telling you, yeah, we've got some work to do before we're going to be able to fix this.
Yeah, the
Right.
thing
So
is,
it's like, but that negative voice is there saying, yeah, but you coulda. Yeah, but you coulda.
yeah, and the fact is, you'll never know what the outcome of that other decision would have been because you
Nope.
didn't make that decision.
Yeah,
And I
and you
think
have to trust it.
that's the overarching thing with this is like you'll never know what the other side would have been because you didn't choose that. So those what if stories are just going to bury you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I DNF'd at Javelina as well, and we know that from our conversations. And the next morning, I had just run 52 miles. Like the next morning, I've raced 50 miles and been sore as all get out the next morning. I woke up the next morning after DNFing and nothing felt sore. So immediately the questions are like, could I have kept going?
Yeah.
Should I have kept going? And the answer that I had to fall back on was trust the decision that you made. Because right now you can't change it. It's not like I can go run back out onto the course and finish the last 48 miles. So I have to trust it. And as the day went on, I realized it was the right decision because now I'm no longer racing. I'm still drinking water and I still wasn't peeing. Like my body was just so depleted of any sort of nutrients and liquids that, so for people who don't know, like my kidneys started hurting on the third
Ooh,
loop.
we went rhabdo, eh?
Close. Yeah. I got really close. And so I was like, man, I would run 30 seconds a minute and I would be in pain. So then I would walk and then I would try to run again and I would walk. And so at the Jackass aid station is when I decided to pull the plug and to not go to the bathroom for much of the next morning, even though you had spent all night drinking water, and the next morning drinking water and still not going. That's when I knew. I was like, yeah, you made the right decision. But to Evan's point, like, and to your point about that negative talk, like, am I making the right decision? It was there for a very long time.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit more, actually, because I think within the endurance culture, that death before DNF is a
Mhm.
flag that waves. And like, I get it. It's fun to say, kind of like pretending to be a pirate is fun. Like, it's like, yeah, like that's cool. And like, I would never wear clothing that said it, but like I get it, because it's one of the ways that people will pump themselves up to push through hard things. But when, like, you know, the day, I'm going to get real graphic for a second, okay? Because the surgery I'm actually awaiting is what's called a fistula surgery, meaning I've got actually 3 buttholes right now. So I've got points of my gastrointestinal system have created new tunnels where they're not supposed to be. And so technically speaking, I got extra holes down there. And like, my surgeon gave me the okay to run all this stuff, but she said, you know, be careful of these certain things and, you know, stay clean, obviously. But like during the race, the pain because of that, because the chafe is just not normal chafe, it's much more extreme. That was one of the determinant factors outside of my Achilles alone. But I remember sitting on the toilet and I'm literally shitting out blood and still thinking I could have. And I remember, like, literally, again, graphic, wiping myself and going, oh shit, going, that's a pretty big red flag. If my brain is thinking, yeah, you could have, and you're literally shitting blood, that's a problem. And there's something in our culture that is saying that we need to push ourselves beyond wise limits because we're all soft. And I recognize that myself. I got into ultrarunning because I thought I was weak. And that voice of be strong, you know, whatever, be tougher, is still hanging around telling me that, you know, shitting blood isn't a good enough signal that you made the right choice.
That's totally understandable. The conversational point about death before DNF, totally not understandable from my perspective. That's the thought process that people have. And that's not to say I didn't think while I was racing Ironman before I got into trail racing, like I'm going to do everything to get to the finish line. I don't care what it takes to get there. And as I've matured and grown in this sport, I've come to realize a handful of different things. But one of the ones that is really just sticks out to me in my own mind is people are going to slap me on the back if I finish, even though I'm shitting blood. And then the very next day, when Landon posts that I can't wait to race this upcoming weekend at the next race, they're going to forget about me shitting blood and finishing the race because they're not going to celebrate you. They have
Nobody's better for it.
Right. Like we're all just moving forward at this pace that is unrelenting. And so then to put myself in physical harm's way for a pat on the back, a kudos on Strava, or a double tap on Instagram is fucking bananas, man. Like it is just absolutely and utterly bananas in my mind. And I've come to realize, okay, I DNF this race. I come back in, 6 weeks, a month, a year from now and do another race. I'm going to get the same back slaps and the same kudos and everything. Like nothing is going to change in that realm. And I just think that's a little bit of a maturity thing too.
Yeah, it's similar to, like, I own a business with my wife. We've learned on the go because we didn't plan to own a business. We did when we started it, obviously, but like that was never our goal. And I kept hearing from people, you got to hustle. And I'm like, I think hustle, like the hustle culture is very similar to death before DNF. I don't think people fully understand what it means. You don't need to hustle. You need to look at the data. You need to look at the balance sheets and you need to look at your progress and your business plan. And the more vulnerable you look at those things, or vulnerably you look at those things, the better you're actually going to be at business. In the same way, like when I work with athletes, because I do quite a bit of sports psychology working with endurance athletes, I want to teach them to be okay with being vulnerable, to do the body scans throughout their race. And so that they can understand, okay, what are the things that might be going around so I can attend to them quicker, but also so that I can make wise decisions so that this racing thing isn't just a thing that I'm doing for the glory for this year and next before I burn out, but instead is actually a lifestyle thing that brings me great joy.
Yeah, my emergency management brain went to like risk tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
If I think back to some of the things that in positions that I put myself in the racing scene or running scene before kids versus now having kids or having a career in life and other things that are going on, the thing that I see probably the most of is this, again, it's this carrot that just seems to be like, no matter how much you achieve, you're just gonna keep pushing that carrot further and further until you start being okay with like where you are right now. That carrot is just gonna be on that stick and you're gonna be chasing it for the next 10 years until you can get to that place where it doesn't have to be death before DNF. Yes. Do I believe in challenging ourselves and putting ourselves out there? Yes. But if I had ran on my ankle at Tahoe for any more than I did after that marathon on that ankle, I don't know if I would even be running for the next year. And it's like, at what cost is it to you to put yourself in that position? And this is the thing that I found as well too, is when I first came in, you would see all these people come into the sport, and now it's like younger and younger coming into this sport. I will say, I mean, we can all attest to it. It's, addiction, mental health, drugs, alcohol, gambling, whatever it is. Usually it's a swap for one or the other sometimes.
Yep.
But these younger people coming in who don't really understand what their bodies are capable of yet, and they're willing to just like destroy them, and then they're gone in 2 years, and then you'll never hear from them again. I mean, longevity to me is the key here. But what's your idea of the risk side of things with some of the athletes that you're working with, Landon? Like, how do you have those conversations to reframe it for them so it isn't death by DNF?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I talk about a lot with athletes and clients in general is patience, right? Like, I'm the person who used to love risk taking. I've done the skiing in the no fall zones, climbing up things and jumping off things on skis that, like, if it goes wrong, you're dead. I've done that, and now that I have kids like yourself, I don't want to do that anymore. But I'm still having the same amount of fun teaching them to ski. And so when I'm with my clients and I'm, they want to go big and they want to go hard and all those things, I'll talk about patience. I was having a run with some friends last weekend, and like part of our kind of run group here there in Spruce Grove, just outside of Edmonton. And we were talking about training days. And one of the guys was talking about he trains 6 days a week. And I challenged him a little bit. I said, like, there's a total place for 6 days a week, but like, you've been running for a year and a half. And you're going into hard triathlon training of, these massive builds, trying to get these 6 days a week religiously. There's a place for 5 days a week as well. And there's a place of 3, and there's a place to 4 days a week. And so instead, like, thinking about that, patience, you're going to be a better athlete if you let your body adapt. You're going to be a better athlete if you let your brain adapt instead of just shooting for the stars all the time. And so whether you're working through mental health things of like, I want to learn all the tools right away so I can fix my marriage, or I want to learn all the tools right away so I'm never depressed again. I'm like, okay, we're going to do one. We're going to do one thing. And we're going to start there. Not because it's good for business, because you're going to have to keep coming back to the more things, but because like your brain can't handle all those other things. And patience is going to be the thing. Time is our friend on this.
Have you slowed that down even more with the penetration of digital media and digital technology into our lives, where the information just never seems to end, right? Every time you open your phone, there's 900 notifications, 900 emails, 900 posts. And so when you're working with athletes, are you slowing them down even more purposefully because there is so much that is coming at us on a constant basis?
I don't know if it's changed 100%, because I think like one thing that psychologists do oftentimes, or psychologists like me from like the schools of thought that I work within, is we'll ask, where did you learn that from? When's the first time you remember doing that as a way of, coping? When's the first time you remember responding in that way, whatever that is? And so when it comes to athletes, and they're doing something, particularly if they're not working with a coach, I'll sometimes go like, hey, where'd you learn that from? And it's really non-aggressive and open-ended question. And they're going to be saying, well, I saw so-and-so is doing this. I'm like, okay, let's take that apart a little bit. I'm not a coach. I read a lot about training theory. I do coach myself because I'm a nerd and I really like learning about things. I have been coached as well. I had an amazing coach that really got me to a place where like 100K was both possible and fun. And we're still friends. I just don't train with a training plan that works in that way. But like, I'll ask them where it comes from, and we'll just like, okay, let's test the data. Let's check that out and figure out like, where does that come from? It is a valid source. And because I know enough that I can kind of converse in that area, sometimes it'll be like, oh yeah, I think I might need to take 2 rest days a week in order to make the adaptations before I can actually go to 5, 6 days a week type thing. Am I mathing correct? I think so. Yeah.
There's definitely a time and a place, as you say, for different things in different cycles. Now I always look at it as seasons. That's the way that I break down all my training for me, for my athletes. This is a build season. It's going to be boring. I'm sorry, but that's just the case. I can make it a little fun, but overall it's going to be boring, easy mileage as we head into winter. We're just trying to maintain. We're not trying to, if you have an early season race, that might be different, but most people are not racing that often. I mean, unless you're an elite and you got Black Canyons coming up in early part of the year. But it just seems like an opportunity to slow down sometimes. And I think that's something that gets sorely missed in a training plan, is the recovery side of things.
I've been reading a lot of Scott Johnson's Training for the Uphill Athlete, and learning things about myself in there. Like, I'm definitely a fast twitch muscle boy. Like, I was a center forward playing soccer. I did not run much. I was all power all the time. I'm 6 feet tall, 200 pounds. I'm not a little dude. I'm probably a little north of 200 pounds. I don't know what I am these days. I don't have a scale, but I'm learning that, like, as you said, patience during that build stage. I used to always do speed work, and then my lactate threshold would just drop constantly to be lower and lower and lower heart rates. Like, I didn't know why. Like, what am I doing wrong? I probably need to go harder. But teaching athletes is the same as teaching clients, is that patience with the basics of, like, for me, I barely do any speed work now. It's almost all just, plodding miles at a really easy pace. And I'm way faster than I was 2 years ago. Like, way faster. My lactate threshold is rising significantly because I'm learned to be patient. So when you give clients that biofeedback or that mental feedback where it's like, let's test this, let's try it out, let's see what happens, let's run an experiment. It's kind of like in the same way of, like, when I started applying Scott Johnson's stuff and being patient with the basics. It's like, oh yeah, it works. It feels much better.
It made me think about this idea of, like, what's out there on the internet that gets people to think that they have to do every run as hard as they can, as often as they can, instead of these, cycles that help you build progress. And because from my perspective, there's information everywhere. There's just so much stuff everywhere. And the three of us are talking about, go slow to go fast, essentially. And yet there are so many people out there that are going fast to then go slow. And in your practice, when you're dealing with athletes and trying to educate them a little bit so that they don't burn out, because I would imagine that's probably one of the biggest factors that athletes come to you with, is this, I'm burning out, I'm tired of this stuff and whatnot. Like, how do you help them disseminate the information that's coming at them on a constant basis?
Yeah, that one's a hard piece. And I would say that's not just true for athletes, it's true for everybody, because there is a host of really, really shit mental health facts out there that people take. And there's a lot of bad therapists even. I always like to point out the fact that, like, when we started out our company, we were partnered with a creative company. And so we made a ton of reels. Evan's probably seen them because they sometimes get blasted probably into his stratosphere being a runner and, certain demographics that I'm going for sometimes. But, like, none of our reels ever went viral. Even, like, the quality of them, the filming, like, the editing was, like, solid. Never went viral. And, I started understanding that, like, we're not saying viral things. We were saying facts. We were focusing on things that were healthy and weren't flashy. And I 100% stuck to it. I was not going to make clickbait. I'm too punk rock to be into clickbait. I don't want to do it because I want to stick to what's actually real. And, like, it's interesting. Like, I think this platform as well is one of those same things where it's focusing on what's real instead of just being clickbaity and ridiculous. And the algorithms don't work that way, because the more dissonance that's present, the more likelihood of engagement. So now I just put spelling mistakes in things, because then people, like, hang out on things longer. Like, oh, I think that E is a little out of line, or that, I think they misspelled inside. And interestingly, those things get more clicks because of mistakes, and it's totally intentional, but also I'm dyslexic. So it's like, it's easy to leave and easy to do. So it's interesting that, like, trying to disseminate truth with people and trying to disseminate what are wise facts is a discussion back and forth where quite often I'm in a place where I strongly disagree with my client, but I can't lead with the disagreement. Instead, I have to, like, I'm going to do something called consciousness raising, where I'm going to walk through that concept with them and open their eyes to it even bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm going to try and show them neutrality so that they can open their eyes to it very realistically, because if they follow a thought from beginning to end, they're going to see the conclusion, right? So if someone thinks, like, I'll give you an example. If someone thinks that they need to work on their hardness. And so they're going to get up one random day, tell their partner, I'm going to go run 100 miles. I'm just going to do it on my own. You can crew me, all these things. I'm like, okay, cool. Let's follow that out. What's going to happen? And we'll start talking about it. And we'll start, you're like, okay, here's the journey. I don't know if my partner's going to be stoked about me telling them to do it. Okay, that might be a problem. Going through this, and like by looking at things realistically, our internal insight or our own innate wisdom actually tends to shine through. So that's the trust that I put in my clients, is that I truly believe that once they see everything, you lay it out on the table with them, they actually know what's good for them and what's not. And when you lay it out in a way that's not trying to push them in one way or another, but instead trying to clean the lens so that they can see clearly, they're very likely to take and make good choices in their lives. That's just going to build trust for themselves.
Yeah. I mean, putting that lens on of understanding that a lot of the things like you talked about, Jason, that we're seeing this, death by DNF, or, we'll say, I hate using the term, but influencer culture of it's entertainment. That's what it is. This is entertainment. This isn't real life. This isn't, in my opinion, an athletic endeavor in some regards. It's purely shock and awe to get the likes, to get the looks, to get the sponsorships, to get the money, to be paid. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying that's everybody, but there's so much of it now that you don't know it's almost like you don't know what is real anymore in a lot of regards. I mean, AI aside from that, but it's, you look at those things and it just feels performative. It doesn't feel like genuine, like coming from like the soul. Like if I had an idea, I'm going to go and run 100 miles every day for the next week. Okay, well, that can be performative, or I can be intentional with it. I can maybe go tie a charity to it. I can maybe go do this. And maybe I do it completely silent, and maybe I'm not posting on social media about it. But I don't know, I just feel like there's different angles to not make it performative. But
I have a lot of hope, actually. I have a lot of hope because there's this developing growth of the influencer who's actually real. And I think they're the reluctant influencer in a lot of ways. They're showing up at places, but they have a lot of influence. Yeah, Evan, totally. Like me and Evan did not know each other, and you were a parasocial relationship for me until we finally met in real life in the leg 4 on Death Race, where you just kind of tapped me on the back. It's like, hey, Lan, I want to meet you in person finally, right? Yeah. But like that's always been, and like I'm gonna go to music for a second to describe this. It's like, there's always the bombastic ridiculousness that starts a movement. And like, I'm going to label that as the Sex Pistols. The Sex Pistols are not a punk rock band. They are a boy band. They're created by a fashion label and a sex shop that was a fashion label that now is actually huge. And so the Sex Pistols are literally a gathering of people to create this band. And that is the exact opposite of the Clash. The Clash were the real deal. Those that are alive still are the real deal, probably in one way or another. Unfortunately, Joe Strummer is not with us anymore, and is 100% the real deal, right? And the Clash were writing highly political music that was a description of the, being on the dole, of experiencing what it was like to be in the UK in the late 70s and early 80s. They were writing music that was actually transformational. They were inserting other cultural elements that had nothing to do with them, because they were learning about these things that were kind of similar patterns, and they were a political movement. They were not a boy band. And so I think that's what we're seeing in a lot of things, where there are people, I'm not going to name names because I don't want to lift them up on a pedestal and kind of create some false idols here in some ways, but like we're seeing that more and more in our culture, whether it's within ultra running or whether it's just in social media in general. There's people that are standing out for saying things that are true and wise, and they're getting traction. It's slower. They're still not as flashy as those other, but they're the ones that are going to stand the test of time. So I have hope.
It's funny you say standing the test of time, because as we started talking about influencers, I immediately thought to myself, okay, you're cashing a check today, but how long can you keep this facade up? And then eventually you're going to burn out. And then what's your next shtick? Whereas for us, like this show in particular, right? This is a super slow burn, and we do it for the audience who wants to come and hang out for an hour every 2 weeks and have open, honest, and vulnerable conversations. And they're hard, right? Like I've been running this business for 5 years, and would I love to have more commas in my bank account? Absolutely, right? Mm-hmm. Are there days where I spend, I don't have hair, but pulling my hair out of my head about I got to pay this bill, this client hasn't paid, and the worry and the stress that comes with it. But I'm also grounded in the fact that this is here for a very long time. And it makes me wonder, again, to the burnout question, if you're the influencer and you cash a check for 12 months straight, and then the client is like, yeah, sorry, you're out. Now what? Like, I guess that's where we see people just doing, pardon my anger about this, but dumber and fucking dumber things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've treated a few influencers, and that is 100% true. And like, I gotta say, like, I really like my clients, and I think there's been 2 successful influencers that I've treated throughout my career, and like I really grew to appreciate them because of like understanding what they were trying to do versus who they wanted to be versus who they were supposed to be versus like all these different things, the struggle that they went through, and they one still is very much an influencer, has had to reinvent themselves over and over again. The other one like left that industry completely. And so it's really interesting to see what that is like, we're all just people trying to figure these things out. But when you are trying to be something you're not, you're cashing a check that you're going to have to reinvent yourself to catch the next one. Right.
Right.
And it just gets harder and harder and harder. And that's where we get this hustle culture where you need to work harder. Like we've built our company slow. We've never given ourselves 2 paychecks. In fact, our family probably makes less than most psychologists make. We live in a very simple house. We didn't make those decisions just for the business. We made it also for the culture as we grow here. We also made it because my kids are only going to be preteens and teenagers for a very short time. And I don't want to miss that. And you can't really pay me enough to miss that. And I have this incredible relationship. And so when I ground myself in these things that are like incredible, like my 2 daughters, my dog, my wife, my community, that's the thing that I want to invest in, not in a perceived sense of how I'm going to feel if there's more zeros attached to my bank account.
Yeah. Like when I just taught this to a class, or that I shouldn't say taught, but I said it to my class yesterday. As an entrepreneur, the idea that you're going to do things at all costs to make all the money falls on deaf ears when it comes to me, because my equation is checkbook stable and time rich versus checkbook rich and time poor. And I want to be able to, hang out with my friends. And this weekend we're going to Scottsdale to hang out and be amongst a group of people doing the Every Woman's Marathon and just all of those different things that give me wealth. Right. Sure. My landlord doesn't take my good feels to pay the rent, but we make money to pay the rent. And then we have the good feels wealth side of it all. And that to me is uber valuable. So I appreciate that same mindset that you just expressed for yourself in your business with your wife. To me, that's the way to do it.
Yeah. It makes all the difference.
Yeah, my standard line now is, it's very simple, very similar to you, Landon. If I can have the situation that I am currently in, where at any point, if I wanted to go pick up my kids from school, at any point, I can. And that's my line now. It's like, I want to be able to spend as much time with them to be able to go and have that freedom and flexibility. And if I can have that, then I'm living in my proper state right now. And that's really my line now.
Yeah, if you hold your kids and you say, I don't want more of this, you're probably doing something wrong. Because like as I hold my daughter this morning, or no, it was yesterday, I was giving her a hug and my nose was buried in the top of her head because she's the perfect height. And so I'm like in her head, just holding her tight. I'm going like, This is what it's about. I want this to be the feeling or the litmus test that tells me whether I'm on the right track. This is my biggest value right here, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And she's the greatest, I love you, dad person. She's like the most thankful kid in the world. And so it's like just validates that and supports that.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about like what you've done to help clients and what I guess the terminologies and different areas that you've worked in within psychology. But what is one profound thing that you've learned from one of your clients that has stuck with you?
Hmm. That question is so hard to answer because I honestly believe that every day my clients teach me something profound. Like my relationship with my wife is richer because of the couples work I do.
Mhm.
My relationship with my parents is better because of the work that I do, like all this stuff. But trying to think, I know there's a good one and I just can't think of it right now. But um, I think actually I'm going to go back to my relationship. Um, because like watching the patterns of doing couples work, of those patterns that are on display. There's usually someone who like pursues the problem in the person, and the stronger they pursue, the further they withdraw, which is like a common emotion focused therapy way of explaining the way that couple dynamics work. One pursues, that triggers the other person's withdraw, that withdraw triggers that person's pursuit. And in working with couples, I always knew theoretically which one I was. But through 13 plus years of practice, I think that's what it is. I've gotten better at actually recognizing myself in that pattern in the moment with my wife, and being able to go like, oh, we're not doing this great. I want to do it differently because I really, really know that I can't win this conflict right now, because winning this conflict will mean more separation between us. And instead, I want to learn how to have this conversation that actually brings us closer. And so, like, just learning that, talking to my clients every day, seeing how they struggle with it, seeing how they succeed with it, just encourages me to keep working with that cycle. And like, my wife is absolutely my best friend. I spend a lot of time with her. She just left. She was 2 offices down, though. But like, I get to practice that on a regular basis.
I'm going to ask a somewhat similar question to that because
Mhm.
I was once asked, how do I hold space for all the people that I hold space for? How do I root them on constantly, cheer them on constantly, provide an ear constantly? And that's what you're doing for your clients.
Mhm.
So, how do you hold space for yourself and who's helping you? Like, I presume your wife, you just said she's your best friend,
Mhm.
is one of those people. Are there others that, allow you to open up and talk to and have these kinds of conversations with?
Yeah, I think it's important. I don't currently have a therapist, but the school that I went to actually made that mandatory, which is actually somewhat considered somewhat unethical. You can't mandate therapy really, but they mandated when you're doing your practicums, you actually had to do, for each of the 4 practicums, you had to do 6 sessions of therapy. And so, like, I think that was a huge formational period of me learning to hold capacity and hold space for the work that I do. Um, but yeah, my wife, my colleagues here, I only hire people that I think are gonna uh, fit with the. We only hire people that are gonna fit with the values of approach. We don't want hustlers. We want hard workers. We want people that are going to be something that is expected for our clients, right? And so they, as a community, we come together, at least once a month to do case consultation and work through things. And sometimes it's personal, right? My family are those people as well. But the way I've learned to hold capacity for my clients is, I remember one of my professors, I was then his TA, and we actually got to co-teach for a bit. We actually traveled to Europe and studied Franciscan theology together for a little bit, where he taught it and I'd learned with a group of people. But like, I got to know him really, really well. Um, he told me early on in my career, he goes, I can't wait for you to have a client you don't like. And it was like the most brutal thing for someone to say, because I thought I was doing everything right. And I liked my clients and I was finding ways to like my clients. And eventually I did get someone, right? The person rubbed me the wrong way, or they just like triggered certain elements, or like the way that they responded to me made me feel ick, whatever it was, right? And I went back to that conversation with Rolf. That was my professor and friend at that time too. And I went back to it and I was like, okay. I gave him an answer then. And I think that answer might still be right. And the answer I gave him was, our job as therapists is to gain more understanding of the person. And when you gain more understanding of the person, one of the natural byproducts of that is compassion. Because you understand it's not because they're a bad person or they made bad choices or because they had bad parents. There's a whole host of things that result in the behaviors and the people we become. And it's really complex, and it's extremely rare that someone actually wants to be an asshole. It's extremely rare. I might have met maybe 2 people my entire life outside of my career and inside my career that actually wanted to be an asshole. Like I know a lot of people. And so I went back to this person and I that I was working with, and I talked to some colleagues. Okay, how do I work through this? I think I talked to my therapist at the time. And what we focused on was, okay, keep doing the understanding. Keep seeking compassion and understanding. And eventually I got there. And we both began to have breakthroughs in our therapy. It was starting to work. So when people talk about therapists having and making space to hold, the things that we're working with and the people that we're working with, I actually think it's really easy if you've done the work to figure out your why and to figure out your how and to figure out what is the theoretical orientation that makes sense of all these things. If you've done that work, it's going to be a journey, but it gets easier and easier and easier. So I don't struggle with that at this point.
Yeah, I can attest to having a few therapists that I hated, if that counts. I'm sure it goes both ways here. But I think the one thing that I can honestly say for the hundreds of sessions that I've done over the last number of years, working through the PTSD and the anxiety and the depression, and going on that other side and feel like I'm actually on the other side of the mountain coming down now in a really positive way, the rapport and relationship is likely the number one thing that will direct whether or not you improve.
Yeah.
Hands down. That is my belief in everything that I've done. I don't know if you would attest to that as well too.
It's actually a thing that all therapists know. There's this book that most therapists should read. It's called The Heart and Soul of Change. And it's kind of like a Bible within the American Psychological Association. I think it's been published many, many times over. And it's basically the theoretical orientations to these things. And it talks about common factors within therapy. And some people will interpret common factors one way, meaning only therapy is only successful because of these common factors. And there's a school of thought that says only cognitive behavioral therapy, ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, and behavioralism are the only valid types of therapy. I don't necessarily agree with that. But the common factors theory is basically that there's some common factors that occur in all types of therapy. There's you have to have a theoretical orientation of some kind. You have to have hope for your clients. Either you or your client has to have hope. I'm probably going to mess these up, but I'm going to do my best to recite this to you. You have to be able to build rapport with your client. And I think there's a few others, but I can't remember them off the top of my head. And the reality is the most important of all those things is building that therapeutic relationship. Very little change can occur without that therapeutic relationship. And that gives me hope for the future because yes, we can build a relationship with AI, but I don't want an AI girlfriend. I want a real girlfriend. I don't want an AI therapist. I want a real therapist that's flesh and blood and is human and deeply flawed and a hypocrite and isn't perfect, because that's what I want to be working within, because that seems to be what works within our world. Right. And so if you're a therapist and you're not practicing and learning how to build that rapport and to build real relationships, you're missing out on so much change for your clients.
I just had this conversation yesterday with my class about AI, and AI can only give you an answer based on the inputs that people have put in there. And so if people are putting in bullshit, then the return on the AI is going to be bullshit, right? And so when I think about the therapist as AI, I'm it's pulling people. I could go on the internet right now, put a whole blog post up about here's how you should do things as a therapist, not being a therapist, right? and then AI will pull it and spit that out at you, and you might take that as Bible and verse, which you absolutely should not. And so I think the human connection is paramount in growth, trust, relationships, and all of the things, and not just using the computer. But that's just me going off on a tangent about AI. But I want to mention these two things I've noticed. These are observations, and you feel free to expand on either one of them. The first thing you said was connection with people and who you hire, right? They have to buy into essentially the vision and mission of Approach. And I had interviewed Josh Rosenthal, who is the founder of Borderlands. And one of the things he said to me was, when I bring people on to be podcast hosts or they're going to work with me on Borderlands, they have to be a good hang. He said, like, they don't have to be like the rainmaker, shall we say, because if they're not rainmakers, but we can hang out, we can make decisions and move chess pieces on the board so that we end up being successful by whatever determinant of success we measure. And that's kind of the same philosophy you had. So I thought that was a really interesting observation, because you're two people I full on respect, look up to as business leaders, as well as athletes in our endurance sports space. The other thing you said was about your teacher, your professor. You said, my friend at the time, which led me to believe that you may no longer be friends. And I thought that is really interesting, because oftentimes we present things as if they've gone on for forever, but relationships do end. Relationships do, run a cycle and come to an end. And I just thought that was a really interesting way you phrased it. And maybe you didn't mean to say it that way, but I do think, like, we as people have to recognize that sometimes even good things come to an end, and that's okay.
Yeah, I didn't mean it that way, but that's also true. Like, we no longer have contact, only because he's teaching in Chicago and I'm in Edmonton, and our worlds have been focused completely elsewhere. Like, actually, this is untrue. I did go for a 10K run because I was in the middle of Manitoba, and it was so bored that I'm like, I got nothing to do. I'm gonna run 5 kilometers that way and back, and that was like the start of running for me in some ways. But our world just went different ways, and it's fine. Like, he's no longer teaching at the school that we were at. I'm no longer teaching in that school. And like our worlds just kind of moved us to different places, and that's okay. And I would be very surprised, though, if we met up with each other randomly, that there wouldn't be this celebration of like what he's accomplished and what I've accomplished, and like he's hugely responsible for so much of what I've accomplished. Him and another friend of mine who lives north of me, who's still, like, we're still in contact, are hugely responsible for who I am as a therapist, and as a person in general. So, but like, I think there's that important piece of like, things end.
Yeah.
Relationships to things end. Like, we're not into them anymore. I bought tickets for a show in Vancouver that's supposed to be tonight, actually. And I was like, hey, Lindsay, we can go fly to Vancouver, do a splits trip, see the show, come back. And then, like, both of us a couple months later, like, actually, we're just not into it anymore.
Yeah.
And we haven't been into it since 2004. And so, like, we then sold the tickets at a loss, because I think a couple other people felt the same thing and like bought it under nostalgia. But it's like, that's okay. It doesn't mean that they're a bad band. They're still making beautiful music. It's just not my thing anymore. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Well, I know we could talk for hours. Obviously, this is round number 2, as Jason said, off the hop. So I'm sure we maybe talked about a couple of things the same, but probably all completely different, to be honest, from what I remember.
I think so, actually.
100%.
Which just tells me that there's more to unearth here on future talks, which I'm definitely open to, as I know Jason is always bring guests back that are going to make us want to think a little bit more, which is what you do, Landon. So thank you for being here. Again, if you just want to let everybody know, where can they find you? What are you doing? What are you up to now? Anything you want to drop for our listeners?
Yeah, you can follow me along on social media. I'm not hugely active, but I do try to respond to some folks through my own Instagram, which is Landon Approach I can't remember what it is. Just type in Landon Approach. I'm sure it will show up. And then, for the clinical stuff, at Approach Psych is our handle there. And we do Try to do a lot this coming Wednesday. I think this will come out after that, but this coming Wednesday, a week from today, where we're recording this, we're going to be doing an endurance workshop that's like a $10 fee. It's really just to get people's buy-in so that they actually show up. And that's open for anybody because it's online. And so if anybody wants us to do more of those, it's super easy for me to do. And it's something I'm really passionate about. So they can either send me a message, send me an email, whatever that is. But I try to engage with people as much as I can, as long as it's not with my clients, because I'm not allowed to do that with my clients. Yeah, those are two things. But yeah, I think there's still a few tickets open for that if this does come up beforehand. Yeah, that's kind of what I do.
Amazing. So we like to end with one simple question. Now, we used to have a bunch. It's one simple question. What is one thing you want to continue doing or stop doing over the next year, whether it be a personal habit, a thought, an idea, an activity, snacks at night, whatever you call it.
Okay. I'm going to answer with partially what I answered last time because it's the perfect amount of cringe. Because I said I want to focus on not being cool. And what I meant by that was I wanted to lean into cringe and I wanted to celebrate things that weren't my things, but like were things that I actually liked. Right. And so I mentioned Taylor Swift. There's like my kids listen to Taylor Swift. My wife listens to Taylor Swift. And I was listening to a new album with my youngest, and she's sitting in the passenger seat and was driving on. And it was like, these are bops. Like, I love this music. Like, it is so good. It was just fun. But I'm going to add to that in I want to relearn to be softer as well. I think I've gotten a bit harsher. And like my dad tells me this sometimes. It's like, hey, you got a little more edge. My mom says it too. You got a little more edge these days than you used to. And whether it's like I'm talking about politics, because I can get real passionate about Alberta politics, which Evan will understand because he lives in the same province with all the things that are always going on here. I can get real passionate about other politics. I'm raised by two Americans, so I'm pretty fluent in that world as well. And like I'll talk, and I've gotten a little bit too much edge. I want to learn to be softer in everything, whether it's how I talk to people, how I talk to my family when I'm not feeling my best, or even talking about difficult subjects, because I don't think the world is want for any more harsh people. I think the world is desperate for people that can meet them with softness and tenderness. And that's one of my goals here heading into the next few months is I want to learn to do that.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, I'm going to end it there. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on another episode of Enduring Minds, part of the Everyday Athlete Podcast Network. And until next time, keep going the distance and breaking the silence together. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, Landon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.